So at this time, unless there's any objections, going to move to agenda item 7J, discussion by council vote or other action on award of bid for the Belcher Avenue pumping station. And for that, I'll ask Ms. McDonald and Russ. I'm sorry, 12. So maybe you could just, Russ, could you just start off giving us the overview of the need for this?
Yes, last year I started all the pump stations. They have two, the pumps in there are all 20 years old, and I started replacing those pumps one at a time. But last year we had a little extra money left, and I decided to do Belcher Avenue this year at a cost of $24,732.
Madam Finance Director, do you have anything to add to this in terms of the bid process and selection?
We did go out to bid. We did receive 2 bids, but industrial pump did not follow the bid specifications. So Mr. Carpenter did call DNS Pump, and they did lower the price from what they originally sent a bid in for $24,733. We do have the funds in the sewer contingency fund to cover the cost of these 2 funds.
Which is what it's there for, correct?
Correct.
This is a routine replacement of aging equipment.
Yep.
Mr. President.
Mr. Zawinski.
Mr. Carpenter, my understanding by reading this packet that you and your support team are going to install these pumps.
Correct.
Okay. Now, Russ, I've asked this question before. Parts, are they interchangeable? Or the stuff, would you be taking some parts and keeping them on the shelf in case we need them? Cannibalizing?
Well, like I said, last year when I started, we had, I sent one pump out that went down to Mechanic Street, and that pump came back from the shop totally unrepairable. It was going to cost $10,000 to repair it and $13,000 to buy a new one, which life expectancy is about 20 years. So I felt it wasn't worth. Now Belcher Avenue is the same thing. I have no spare pumps available. This is what I'm trying to do. There's one pump that was replaced in Belcher 5 years ago, and I'm hoping to have that pump as a spare, for which is going to include the Silver Pines mechanic in Belcher.
Mr. President, based on the recommendations of Finance Director, Town Administration, and also from Mr. Carpenter's presentation this evening, I will make a motion to approve $24,733 for the industrial pumps needed for Belcher.
Motion by Councilor Zawinski, is there a second? Second by Councilor Palace. Is there any discussion?
Just for the record that it's DNS Pump and Supply, because I'm using the word pump a few times here.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, we've had a motion, second discussion, any further discussion? Hearing none, and that's for a roll call vote.
Ms. Alves?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Yazbek?
Yes.
Mr. Zawinski?
Yes.
Mr. Clarity?
Yes, motion carries, and Russ, while you're here, I think we're going to move on to K, which is discussion by council vote or other action on water department budget. We have a budget in our packets. And we'll turn to Madam Finance Director.
Okay, Russ and I went through the water budget together. We do have a line item detail that everybody should have received with the breakdown of what they requested in the dollar amount. I went through the revenue with the numbers of units that MJ provided and did not increase any of the costs, or any of the $6.61. And our budget request is $561,364, which is the same as our revenue number.
Does anybody have any questions?
What will the water bills increase by?
They're not.
They're not. Okay. Just wanted to hear it again.
No.
Motion to approve the budget as presented.
Motion by Council Yazbek, is there a second? Seconded by Council McGee. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, ask for a roll call vote.
Self,
Yes.
McGee,
Yes.
Yazbek,
Yes.
Mr. Valensky.
Yes.
Mr. Flaherty.
Yes, motion carries. And at this time, I'm going to ask the council's indulgence. I know we have a number of folks who are here this evening regarding the building permit on Woonsocket Hill Road. So I would like to move to agenda item number 12D, discussion by council, vote, or other action on conflict of building permit issues at 764 Woonsocket Hill Road. This was added to the agenda at the request of Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett in the audience?
Yeah, it's actually for a number of us.
For a number of folks, and I know a lot of folks are here for this. So just briefly, this concerns the issuing of a permit for a garage, steel garage, and that permit was
Fine way to put it.
that permit was issued. We have a letter in our packets from the assistant solicitor who was in charge of overseeing zoning. This is the if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Lavely property, Plat 8, Lot 258. And I think that it may be beneficial for those in the audience if I take a moment to read the letter from the assistant solicitor. Anybody object? Okay. This was dated July 18th.
For the record, Mr. President, none of us have seen this letter, so we'll be.
Okay.
Mr. Bennett, I have a copy which I just received at 4 o'clock via email. You're welcome to my copy first.
And Ms. Zwolenski, I'll get that, I don't want to interrupt.
Okay.
Okay.
In case you wanted to ask questions from it. No.
So the letter is addressed to Robert Benoit, Chief Inspector, Town of Smithfield. Dear Mr. Benoit, I am writing to follow up on our meeting of July 17th, wherein you presented me with a series of documents relative to the herein above mentioned Lavely property, Plat 8, Lot 258. Specifically, your office requested an opinion on the potential scope of jurisdiction for the town with respect to an issue raised by neighbors over a proposed structure that Mr. Lavely has applied for a permit to construct on said property. After reviewing the documents you have provided, I made the following findings. Mr. Lavely applied for a permit to construct a 40-foot by 80-foot structure on his property located at 764 Woonsocket Hill Road on July 2nd, 2013. Said permit was issued by your office on July 10th, 2013. This property is in a RS40 zone, which is suburban residential. It appears that Mr. Lavely complies with the town's zoning ordinance with respect to building setbacks for height, front, side, and rear setbacks, and accessory use. More specifically, under section 6.8 for accessory buildings and structures, the restriction on coverage is that a building may not exceed 25% of coverage of the overall square footage of the lot. I'll just read that again. Under section 6.8 for accessory buildings and structures, the restriction on coverage is that a building may not exceed 25% of the overall square footage of the lot. To be clear, nothing in your zoning regulations restricts any size of the proposed building beyond that requirement, as long as an applicant meets all other zoning regulations in compliance. In the case of Mr. Lavely, the facts show that his existing house is 32 feet by 38 feet, or 1,216 square feet. The proposed structure that he plans to build as an accessory garage is to be 40 feet by 80 feet, or 3,200 square feet. The total combined footage of these buildings is 4,416 square feet. It is my understanding that Mr. Lavely's lots total 1.65 acres, or 71,874 square feet. If one multiplies the 71,874 by 25% for a coverage ratio, combined buildings on the lot may not exceed a total of 17,968 square feet. Mr. Lavely's combined buildings total 4,416 feet. Therefore, if Mr. Lavely were to complete his plans and construct the new 40-foot by 80-foot garage, he would be in compliance with section 6.8 for accessory buildings and structures. Finally, I was presented with a copy of a declaration of protected covenants and restrictions relative to the lot that Mr. Lavallee owns. Said covenant was created by Aaron P. Jarrett Jr. and recorded in the land evidence records of North Smithfield on July 10th, 1986. The document sets forth a restrictive covenant as to what may or may not be built on property designated as lots 1 through 6 on Woonsocket Hill Road. Mr. Lavallee is the owner of one of those lots. These are private covenants. Claims made relative to any alleged breach of said covenants are private contract actions and as such outside the scope of jurisdiction for the town of North Smithfield. Accordingly, it is my opinion from what I have been presented that Mr. Lavallee complies with the town of North Smithfield zoning requirements and the issuance of said building permits. Restrictive covenants are private in nature, and the town should not be an intermediary in any resolutions of contract claims made by owners of said properties. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, signed Stephen R. Archambault, who is the town's assistant solicitor. I don't know if our solicitor has any comment on this, any further comments?
I concur. I did read it this afternoon, and I concur with it.
So, I know that what has been proposed is not a very welcome thing in the neighborhood. I don't, short of this, don't know what, if anything, else that the town could do. In fact, I'm almost under the impression, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if the town were to intercede in private contracts, that would expose the town? Liability.
Well, I mean, we would inject ourselves into litigation.
Does anyone in the council have anything to add?
Yeah, I think this brings up a good point of zoning, that, you know, putting up a building like this, people have been talking to me about it too, and, you know, nobody wants a building that big, especially a metal building next to their house. I totally agree with that. But right now, we're wide open that anyone can do that. So I think we should work on that right away to fix that if that's what we want to do. And as for this problem, I think there's ways around this too. I mean, from what I hear, like I said, I always go to both sides because I want to know the whole story. And when I talked to everybody, they were saying, well, the neighbors and everybody want us to, you know, not put up the building, it's a metal building, but no one's ever asked us. They claim that no one's ever asked to modify it or make it out of wood, and
Didn't know about it.
no one knew about it, right? But those are the questions. Like, nobody talked on this thing. Everyone should have been talking, and nobody really talked to each other. And when I talked to Mr. Benoit, I went down to see him right away, and he had told me the setbacks and stuff, and I agreed. Geez, I wouldn't want it either, but like I said, if there's a building there, could they make it out of wood? Could they make it a prettier building? And they said they would do whatever they needed to do at one point, but no one's ever talked to them.
Tommy, the thing is, the plan that was shared with us.
Can I just interject for 1 second? I don't mean, you can certainly speak. I mean,
Okay.
it's not a public hearing, but I just would ask that if you do want to speak, that you come to the podium and just state your name for the record,
Sure.
if you don't mind. That's.
I'd just like to hear, with all due respect to, I'd like to hear Mr. McGee's complete thought before he's interrupted.
No, so anyway, I got in the middle of it as far as, like I said, I have friends all over Woonsocket Hill Road. You're all my friends, and I don't even know these people, but I went to see them because I just wanted to hear from the horse's mouth what's going on. And I talked to my building inspector, and he said the same thing. Hey, no one talked to anyone. All of a sudden, it's a big deal. You know, I understand the whole thing, but why? And that's why I did get in the middle, because if this building got shoved down your throat and they say, well, this is legal, he can do it, I would want someone to at least trust me and say, hey, listen, can we make it a better building? Can we build it out of wood? Could we do something? And and then the other thing that they had told me is, when they were building this building, they had land, they had the old hut there, and then they filled in all kinds of landfills and stuff, clean fill to bring it into level and everything. spent a lot of money on it. Nothing was said until the last minute, so they spent a ton of money on it too. So that's what was told to me from both sides, and I just think that if we can work out something, it would be a lot better to work something out with a nicer looking building and everybody, because they don't want to be bad neighbors, and you guys don't want to look at a metal shed either. And like I said, everyone asked me, is that a commercial building? 80 by 40? I would think so, you know, that's definitely one. And I thought it was like a big ugly green building. It's still a big metal building, which is awful. But it's at least white with red trim from what I got today. And it's not 80 by 40. I heard it was 40 by 60, someone said. Not that it makes a big deal, but I think the only thing that we can say is if we could get it to be a prettier building, maybe, it might be all right. Then what's there, and I wanted the opportunity to just say that tonight and see what we could do without, you know, to make it better for everybody. That's all. Thank you.
Nan, would you like to speak?
I'm Lynn Frodo from Brentwood Drive, and I'm one of those neighbors that as soon as you come to the end of our street, this is the lovely building we have the pleasure of seeing. I don't have a problem with them erecting any type of structure, but I'm 100% opposed to a metal structure. Something that looks like a warehouse. It can be white with red trim, look pretty on the outside. It's still a metal structure. If they do wood, you know, me personally, I had no clue what was going on there. I'd come home from vacation, the land was being cleared. Then I see the pillars going in for the steel beams and everything else. Again, if it's a nice building, it's welcoming. But a steel structure, I think of Providence Pike where they do the car restorations. Do you want that in your neighborhood? I don't. We paid a lot of money for our house. We pay a lot and take a lot of pride in our properties. If I come to the end of my road, I don't want to see that. Again, if it's going to be a wood structure, fitting in with the environment, fitting in with the neighborhood, go for it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Whitney. I am the closest abutter to Mr. Lavalley. And just to address one of the things that Councilman McGee mentioned about us knowing whether or not this was going on, I had the same experience. Basically, what we first saw was the Quonset hut that was on the property for a few years being put on a flatbed truck. And a few of our neighbors, we all celebrated because we thought finally he was getting rid of the Quonset hut, which clearly doesn't belong in our neighborhood as well. But in any event, that was simply being moved. The land was cleared, and now this, and it is not a shed. It is. I object to that phraseology. It's a metal building. It's a commercial building like you'd see anywhere in the industrial areas of the town. And we've been here for 27 years. We moved here because we thought this was a great community, great schools, had an opportunity to see our real estate appreciated value. This is a bad deal for the town, and it's a bad deal for the local residents. Our property values are going to decrease, and everybody's going to pay the price. Thanks.
Jonathan Mundy, 780 Woonsocket Hill Road. I live 4 houses down from this proposed warehouse. It's not a garage, it's a warehouse. Lived there for 27 years. Was the first one to build there. And we have covenant agreements. For 27 years, I followed those covenant agreements to the letter. I maintained my property in the best state I could possibly maintain it. I've added windows, put a new roof on, I maintained the landscaping. I did that out of respect for my neighbors and also to preserve the property value of my home. I'm 57, I'm cruising to retirement. I was hoping that I'd be able to sell my home for a good profit after 27, 28, 30 years of living there. This warehouse is going to adversely affect my property values, as will a lot of other homes up in that area. If you were to look at the combined value of all the property in this area, it's in the millions of dollars. That translates into thousands of dollars for tax revenue. Now, this is a civil matter. I don't think it should have become a civil matter because I don't think the building permit should have been issued to begin with. Now, if you bear with me, I've got some information here. And the first thing I want to share with you, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, I'm a good old pharmacist. One thing pharmacists do very well is we analyze things. We're going to look at the intelligence test first. This is the scale, and this is what the warehouse will look like in comparison to the residence. And you will notice that the footprint of the warehouse is bigger than the footprint of the residence. You can take the house and put it in the warehouse. It's huge.
Almost 3 times.
It's huge. Now, whether that ordinance says you can do it, it doesn't pass the intelligence test. All the houses in that area are conforming. Which structures? Well maintained. This is a non-conforming structure in a very, very nice neighborhood. You don't see these types of structures up on Brentwood Drive. You don't see it on Knoll Ridge. You don't see it on Merrill Lane. You don't see it down on Socket Hill Road until you get into that area down by the fire department where Mr. Keenan is. This is an aberration. This warehouse is a complete aberration for that area. Now, if you look at the permit, which was referenced earlier, it was pulled on 7/10/13. And it says construct a 40 by 80 foot detached steel garage, and I can't read the rest. It was later changed to 40 by 80. Now, if you look at the ordinances for the town of North Smithfield, page 75, and just bear with me while I pull up on my iPad here. Under section 7.6, expiration of building permit, I'll read it. If the work described in any building permit has not begun with 180 days from the date of issuance thereof, said permit shall expire. That expired in January of 2014. Work didn't begin on this project until 2 months ago. That permit is not valid. It should be pulled. I'll go on. If you look at the compliance checklist, which I have a copy, and it lists a number of things. One of them, zoning compliance issue. It's checked not applicable. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not a zoning expert, but if you look at page 75 again, under section 7.4, I will read to you again, no permit for erection, alteration, moving, repair of any building shall be issued until an application has been made for a certificate of zoning compliance. One does not exist. That permit is not valid. It should be pulled. You're going to hear from a lot of other people here tonight. This is not a civil matter because we tried to get a hold of you folks. Mr. Zielinski, thank you for coming out. Tommy, I didn't realize you came out, thank you. When Mr. Zielinski came out to take a look at the property, he also noticed that there is no building permit posted. There hasn't been a building permit posted there since July of last year. In fact, I don't think it's ever been posted. You drive by today, it's still not posted. The building inspector's been out there a multitude of times. Why has this gentleman not been cited for having a building permit posted? There's a lot of problems with this, folks. A lot of problems. It's not a civil matter, this is a town matter right now. We've been forced into a civil matter because the town didn't do their job. And I have a real problem with that. Thank you very much.
Glenn Murphy, 772 Woonsocket Hill Road, to Woodward from the project. I'm here to speak on one specific thing, and I do have an expertise in it. I'm a wholesale mortgage acquisition specialist, dealing with $1 million every month of package mortgages. which means I also see a ton of appraisals. When this thing started going up, I immediately contacted a few national firms, and introducing a commercial building into a suburban residential neighborhood, okay, doesn't only change the complexion and charm of the neighborhood, you're also talking about lopping off 10 to 12% of the values in that neighborhood. Okay, and as John had said before, we're talking about a lot of values in homes here. So I would just simply say that there's not only losing the charm of the neighborhood, there's also definitively a fiscal detriment to the neighborhood, and that's why we're here tonight. Thank you.
Jim Zanoli, 121 Brentwood Drive. I'm also a concerned neighbor of the structure, for all the reasons everyone else is concerned. But I do have a question about the validity of the permit, because I went and I looked at the Rhode Island wetlands regulations, and that construction appears to be in clear violation of the DEM regulations. DEM regulations clearly state in the wetlands regulation section 6.05, no construction is allowed within 25 feet of a wetlands or 50 feet of a stream, whether it's a seasonal stream. If that being the case, no separate structure larger than 600 square feet is allowed to be built. And when a building permit is issued, doesn't the city have a responsibility to comply with state regulations at the DEM level? Is there anyone from the building department that can say that that structure complies to the wetlands regulations?
It was checked as not applicable on the checklist.
Even though it's a violation?
Yep.
The city doesn't feel a responsibility to uphold the DEM's regulations?
Well, I know that when I asked the assistant solicitor to review this, I asked specifically in writing that he also determined that everything was properly in the file, including state permits.
We have the zoning official there.
Yeah.
Why don't we ask him?
Well, I do want to actually ask him to respond, but I want to hear the full range of issues before, so that we can hear the whole thing.
I say one thing on the wetlands. On the wetlands, they said that they had a study done, and it was legal. That's what they told me. So I don't know if that's true, but they said it was flagged, and wetlands was all set. That's what I heard. So like I said, I tried to get as much information as I could, so I could listen to you.
If I may, Mr. Flaherty, I know I'm not being nice here. I want to make this very clear. But this council does not sit as the Board of Zoning Review. Planning Board of East Greenwich versus East Greenwich Town Council. I don't want to get into a political morass over this, but I can say that I did meet with Mr. Monday. I drove out there. I saw some silt fences were in place to protect silt from going into the wetlands. Those questions were brought up with Mr. Monday by me. He was asking for some guidance, and I did provide that. I said, I can't get involved, but this is what you want to look at. I did not see any wetland flags in that area. Mr. Monday, where are you sitting? Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And did you see any wetland flags at that point?
No, I did not.
So I think that a lot of this is going to have to be re-reviewed by the town building zoning official, because I saw some of these things going on when I was out there early July. Forgive me, I forget what date it was, but I did send an email. I could verify what night I went out there. So you bring up a point that I was concerned with.
Well, obviously, we're all very concerned. We appreciate your action on this. Again, we don't feel the building permit is valid. All the other issues aside, we don't feel it's valid.
Yeah, barring the delineation, if there is a wetland biologist that's delineated that property, and there's a report somewhere in Mr. Roberts' file, those flags could have been moved. I've seen it happen when I was a town planner. People were involved. I'm not saying anybody in the neighborhood did it. Maybe the weather, who knows. But I did not notice any flags on that property, and they should have been there.
Well, very good. Thank you.
I'll make is that, you know, we can all sit up here and look at the proposed structure and say, you know, it's easy to pick out what doesn't belong. At the end of the day, in terms of our job in the council, we have to follow the letter of the law. And I know that there is a challenge, or there's a proposal that would like to challenge the validity of the issuance of the permit. And there may be a valid reason to do that. I asked for clarification. We got a legal opinion on it. I've read it. We're making it available. I think at this time, I'd like to call upon the building inspector if you could clarify.
I'd like to speak, if I could, Mr. Flaherty, I'm on the agenda.
Sure. Mr. Bennett first.
Doug Bennett, 776 Woonsocket Hill Road. I think I know most of you. I've sat where you have sat, and I understand the pressure that you're under. I thank you for your time. Some things we have to clarify. The description of this building and the process that's undertaken is vastly mistaken. As far as the building goes, it's not actually 3,200 square feet. He wants to attach a metal Quonset hut to it. Now it makes it 3,584 square feet. This is a massive structure. It is not residential, it's not private use. He can keep his whole damn house in there if he wants to. He has told, his counselor has told ours, we've retained Michael Kelly. There is a civil issue. We're upset that we have to spend our money to do it. We should not be here. We should not have to do that. The process as far as talking to Mr. LaValle, he's known about this for some period of time. He never came to us. We had no idea. I came back on vacation with my wife the end of the first week of June. He'd mowed that whole damn yard down. He had a huge concrete blocks. You've all seen it. You've been there. I mean, where's the spirit of negotiation? Did he come back and ask anybody if they wanted a near 3,600 square foot steel warehouse? This is a pre-constructed. We've seen the warehouse. You can look at it. Not one single one of you would let it happen in your neighborhood. Not one. You would use all your power and all your influence to fight this thing because it's plain wrong. What I'd like to do too, as far as just to outline, but it's not a civil matter. This permit should never have been issued. The solicitor letter, in all due respect, is what I consider to be an attempt to abrogate your role and to try and make a very difficult decision. You've been placed in this decision because you have assumed a position of leadership. It's very obvious and very irrefutable that this is a lack of a conforming issue. Secondly, I'd like to take a common sense approach. You know, why are we even here in the first place? What are the other ramifications of having a massive structure like that in that area? There's some unconsidered consequences that we have to think about as well. First of all, I went to the zoning ordinance. Page 5, number 5. The purpose of this zoning ordinance is to provide for the protection of natural, historic, cultural, and scenic character of the town and the areas therein. I guess we'll leave that one alone. I then went to zoning applications that are allowed in RS4 zonings. Page 19. They talk about, and now let me also tell you, Mr. LaValle's attorney has informed our attorney it is his intention to house antique trucks with commercial plates. Commercial off-street parking facility, RS7 zone, no. Page 16. We have 6 of them. Any of these may apply. I don't know that they all will, but some of them will. Number 6, automotive fueling area. I don't know that that's the case. Automotive light repair, automotive heavy repair, automotive polishing shop, automotive rental, automotive sales, any of these things that could place there, all no. Town's definition of automotive heavy repair, a structure for a mechanical repair of motor vehicles over 15,000 pounds. No auto body work in any combination of the above will require a special use permit. It's already admitted to this. Automotive light repair, a structure for the mechanical repair of motor vehicles under 15,000 pounds. No auto body work. Any combination, special permit. Some of these, of course, Mr. Mundy's already gone over. This permit's invalid. We shouldn't even be having this meeting. Now let's just talk about common sense. I mean, at some point in time here, you've got a blind corner. It's going to be more blind because of this. Structure is going to already abate what's a difficult corner to see. We have a massive school bus stop right at the corner where Brentwood enters and stares at that structure. In the morning, there's up to 6, 7 kids there every day. We have a drainage ditch across the street that the town maintains. Twice a year, they bring a backhoe out. They clean it out because the water floods across there. We get the snow in the winter. Many of you use this road. It melts in the day and it freezes at night. And DPW is out there sanding it the next day. Now all they need is a car, can't see the next one coming up with 8 kids sitting there on the side of the road. Recently, you folks had to face our quarry ordinance. I had to face it when I was there. Every time there's 3 new people on this council, one of the quarry operations comes and tries to get an exception. They're business people, I don't fault them for that. That quarry application, if that is ever varied from, you know as well as I do, Rankin Path, Holliston, Material, Sand and Gravel, they all get it. If one gets it, they all get it. Even if you deny it, they go to court, they get it because you set a precedent. They'll take this town down to China. You didn't do it, you shouldn't do it. You allow this, get a metal structure, garage, unconforming, anywhere you want. They don't have to ask for permission. They just go to court and they'll get permission. If you folks don't shoot this thing down by simply acknowledging that the permit is not valid, Mr. LaValle can go back to ground. I don't know him. He may be a great guy. I'm a nice guy. Tommy, am I a nice guy?
You are a nice guy.
Tell my wife.
I love Doug.
Meet you later, big guy. It's your job here as leaders, not to hide behind your solicitor who's telling you it's a civil matter. It's not. It's ridiculous. He's doing his job. No disrespect, Mr. Solicitor. I've sat with you on the dais. I've listened to hundreds of these sessions, executive session, where you're going to mitigate your damages. You let this go, and you might as well just call yourself the council to destroy the rural nature of our community. And you have your outs. You don't have to act on anything. You don't even have to act on this permit. They didn't act on it in 6 months. It's void. This violates in so many capacities and so many things that weren't addressed in the solicitor's letter. Folks, what we are asking you to do is either through resolution, discussion, or action with reasonable people, we need a conforming structure on that. I don't fault Mr. LaValle. I don't even know if it's LaValle or LaValle. We have other gorgeous wood structures in the neighborhood. We haven't been asked to judge any of it. Nobody's asked us to do anything. I had 3 weeks when I came back from vacation to try to figure out what the heck was going on. You've got to do this, folks. You've got to come up with a solution. What my solution is, a resolution to be voted on in public, agreeing with the Woonsocket Hill residents, Brentwood, we have people from Indigo, we have people from Rolling Acres, we all have the same concern. You need to enforce the fact that the permit is invalid. It's back to the drawing board. We're reasonable people. We'll talk to anybody. Thank you.
Actually, there's one more person. There's one more person who'd like to speak.
Hi, my name is Kathy LaValle, and I live at 764 Woonsocket Hill Road. And just for the record, we have no issue if there is this much concern about a metal building. We would be happy to change it to a wooden barn. We did have our wetlands surveyed. Someone did remove the flags that were in place. We're now in the process of having more flags put in. We don't want any problems with the neighborhood, and we're more than happy to change our plans and hopefully resolve this problem. We don't want to be in legal conflict with anyone. We just want to enjoy our home, be at peace with ourselves and with our neighbors. I have nothing against anyone in this room. I guess that's really all I want to say. Thank you.
As for the permit, it still legal. The original barn or garage was supposed to go in the rear of the property, so when the permit was issued in 2013, they had started working in the back. Then with the wetlands, they could not locate the building where they wanted it, so they moved it to the side. State law says that once you commence work, the permit is good for 2 years, and then it can also be renewed if it has to be. As for the wetlands, Mr. LaValle took care of that. As for the size of the building, we do not have anything in our zoning that will regulate the size of an accessory structure. As long as it meets all of the setbacks and the requirements, I cannot refuse to issue it.
The question of whether we should have and whether we do have are two different questions.
Say that again?
The question of whether we should have restrictions on the size of structures, or whether we do have restrictions on the size of structures are two different questions.
Okay.
And I think maybe most reasonable people could agree that we should have restrictions, but if they're not currently in the zoning,
they are not currently in our
then
zoning.
you are
I
not
agree.
allowed to deny the permit.
That's correct.
I'll tell you that from my experience, having been on the planning board for about 5 years, is there are a number of things that need to be updated in the zoning ordinance. And unfortunately, those things don't happen until an issue like this comes to the surface and it gets everyone's attention. What else would you like to say about the process?
When Mr. LaValle filed his application to construct that structure, he submitted all of his proper paperwork and documents, plans stamped by engineers, met all of the zoning requirements, and the permit was issued. Unless you have other questions.
Anybody in the council have any questions?
I just want to say, I never want to have this happen again. I think they should work on this zone right away and stop this so it never happens again. But as far as everybody in the room, I mean, you just heard Mr. LaValle talk, you heard Doug Bennett talk, and the neighbors. It sounds like we could resolve this by talking and getting it to a reasonable structure and a reasonable size without going crazy here. We all have to live together, and I gotta be honest, when Doug, Mr. Bennett said, would you want that? Of course, I would hate that. I would hate that in my yard. And when I talked to Mrs. LaValle, I said that too. I said, hey, I would hate it too. And I think that you should get a couple people together and work this out, get maybe a smaller building out of wood, something that fits for everybody, so everyone can be happy. I think that's the only way, other than you can spend all the money you want on lawyers, which doesn't help anyone. It's a loophole in our building zoning, and it's awful. I can't even believe that could happen, you know? I can't even believe we could do a structure like that. But it's gonna stop right away, and I'd really like to see, she seems very sincere, and everybody seems like we don't want that, and listening to some of the other things, like fitting it into a metal building in a historic, not a historic area, but a country area, that makes a lot of sense. I think our forefathers thought of that as that would take care of metal buildings and stuff. And not only when we do metal buildings, but also those tents, also the balloons tents, and all these other structures. They're going to be on the same type of thing. They should look at the whole garage thing, as far as, portable tents and everything else, and bubbles over things. I think they should look at all of that, like, really right away. And I hope we can get together and fix this. And she seems like she wants to work with everyone. I would think that we'd be able to. Does that sound fair?
Mr. Yasman.
Thank you for the neighbors that came out, and Mr. Benoit for your comments. If Mr. Benoit's opinion is that there's a valid permit, and I have no reason to doubt, I understand that, and I guess I have to reluctantly accept it. My biggest concern is the line of sight on that road as the proposed structure, because I did go up there, And to me, it's a public safety issue, as I envision, or as I've been informed. That I wanted to hear everybody's opinion, I wanted to hear everybody's comments tonight so I could further understand the issue. Mr. McGee has already made himself available, and he should be commended for interjecting himself into the middle of this. He's a braver man than I at this point in time. Having said that, with Mr. McGee's indulgence, I would like to see this council at least support some type of motion that maybe Mr. McGee could sit down with Mrs. LaValle, Mr. LaValle, and some of the neighbors and see if Mr. McGee could iron out a compromise. He already seems to be halfway there. There doesn't seem to be a lot further we have to go with this. I don't think it's a marathon. I think it would be a nice short sprint if we could get everybody to kind of compromise and move through it. And if Mr. McGee would be willing to do it, I think that would be an opportune time for us to get this thing behind us. And then I agree with Mr. McGee. We then need to work on trying to make sure that certain structures, types of structures and size of structures are somewhat regulated somehow. And part of that should also be notification to the neighbors, because obviously there was no notification. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, before you make that motion, I'd like to refute what Mr. Benoit stated a few minutes ago.
I'm not the council president, but Mr. Mundy, I appreciate your hard work, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather try to set a tone of maybe compromise if we could, and if for some reason it doesn't compromise, then you and Mr. Benoit can go round and round and
Eddie, this is an important point. Mr. Benoit is suggesting the permit is valid because construction began behind the house. There's nothing in the file that suggested that a building plan was submitted for construction of that warehouse behind his residence. There's nothing in there. The only paperwork in there is suggested that it was the building, the site plan is to where it's located right now. Nothing. I looked at that twice.
I'm happy to work with Mrs. LaValle. I don't even know who she was. And it's a great neighborhood. Welcome to it. We would be more than happy to reach out. But you still have an issue ahead of you. I mean, we spent thousands of dollars to be here. I resent that. Not you folks, not at all. And I know there's a process here. But it's not the size of it on the lot or the setbacks. It's the obvious usage of it. I mean, zoning law here goes a lot more than the percentage of a lot. I mean, when you can take your house and put it inside the house and that's residential personal use, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'm insulted to read that and have to see this permit. It's crazy. I mean, and we will work with the LaValles. It's a nice neighborhood. We've lived there for almost 30 years, and I'm sure they're very nice people. We'll be happy to work with Tommy, who I've already told you how nice he is. But there's still some things that just aren't working here. I mean, again, Eddie, I'm going to leave it alone. I understand. I've been where you are. I've had long nights.
But Doug, even if we were to come back and say the building permit's not allowed, there's nothing stopping Mr. and Mrs. LaValle from walking right down there tomorrow, refiling the application, getting it approved, and a building permit.
And I know that they won't, and you know and have my word that we'll work with them.
Let's try that first.
Absolutely. You're right.
You know,
So I don't know if we need a motion for Mr. McGee to work with the LaValles and some of the neighbors, unless anybody thinks we...
Does the neighbors even want me to work with them? I mean, you know.
We're buying a beer, Tom.
I feel better with a motion, only from the standpoint that at least now everybody knows that he's at least the council liaison, so that if this thing develops and we can strike a compromise, he can explain it to us. On the converse side, if we can't strike a compromise, they'll be able to inform us, you know, so to speak, from the horse's mouth exactly what's transpired. And I think he's already done half the work or a third of the work already. So with that, I'll make a motion that Councilor McGee be the council liaison to try to broker some type of amicable compromise between the LaValles and the neighbors on this particular piece of property on Woonsocket Hill Road.
Motion by Councilor Yazbek. Is there a second?
Second the discussion.
Second by Councilor Zawinski.
I would just like to couch this so that we're not in a legal morass. Certainly I would support Tom doing this, and hopefully the neighbors will embrace this. I would say the open dialogue, it's choosing the words carefully here, so in case it does go legal, You know, Tom, if you want to sit and meet with them and talk about it, but I don't know that, certainly want to make sure it's not holding the council.
I would rather unofficially do it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Unofficially?
Yeah.
I never get any
If it looks like a duck,
responsibilities.
walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, so you're gonna assume liability whether you do it or you don't do it. You can only report back to the council, as Councilor McGee knows, but I'll say it for the rest of the people here. When any one of us acts to try to resolve something, we're only one of 5. It takes 3 to tango. And so, you know, and Mr. McGee can't promise anything. I think what Mr. McGee can do is because he's in the building trades, from a knowledgeable point of view, can hopefully get everybody to get to some point where we can compromise. And like any other compromise, you know, maybe the neighbors don't get everything they wanted. Likewise, maybe the LaValleys don't get everything that they really wanted. But I think it would be in everybody's best interest, the neighbors, the LaValleys, and the town of North Smithfield, if we could reach a compromise on this. And then in the meantime, you know, this council needs to do whatever it needs to do to satisfy or to move forward on the zoning issue, which is a separate issue at this point in time. But so the liability's already there, whether Mr. McGee goes in unofficially or officially, but everybody knows in this room, and everybody who isn't here, I'm sure you're gonna tell them that, you know, 1 of 5 doesn't make 3 of 5. Okay, so he's just gonna be our eyes and ears, and he can hopefully do something to help everybody. That's how I'm envisioning it.
Mr. President, because it is not on the agenda, for the very next agenda, I would like to have listed review of accessory uses.
We can do it under this agenda, item, I believe.
You think so?
It's related.
Okay, then I would like to, through the town administrator.
We have one,
Oh,
we do
sorry.
have a vote, we have a motion
Yeah.
on the table, it's been seconded, we've had discussion.
Mr. President, the only thing that I just want to state is that you understand, or you make it part of the motion, that this is voluntary, that this is not an action by the council that they have to do this. It's a voluntary situation where you're trying to get to a resolution, not that the council's ordering that. So, I don't know if that's clear enough, or...
I think it's clear enough. I mean, we didn't say you had to reach a compromise. We just want to get people to talk, and maybe we can find some common ground.
But I don't want anybody to believe that you are ordering people in the room to get to a resolution.
You can only invite them, and if they don't choose to participate, they don't. And we're back
Right,
at the next
but
meeting.
you're not going to hold, if somebody doesn't participate, you're not going to hold it against them. That's my
Sounds
statement.
like a lot of police to me, Mr. President.
I think it's understood. I think it's understood.
This is gonna be freestyle.
So we have a motion to second with that discussion. Thank you for that input. I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Mrs. Delves? Yes. Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Yazbek?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Flaherty?
Yes, motion carries, and I believe that the issue of there being a precedent is important, and I believe Councilor Zelinski's got a motion to that.
Mr. Flaherty, I'm sure you're aware, we had a zoning committee to create and look at our zones to try and straighten them out. There was roughly 80-something of them. I believe 4 of them were passed in a 6-year period. You know, zoning has always been a very close and dear interest to me. So I would like to have on the next agenda a review of accessory uses on lots. That would cover, then we can get to such dialogue, percentage of the home. Farming is different than urban or whatever, all zones are different, but when I'm looking at 25% of this, we have to look at the size of the home and the accessory use. And the accessory use should not be 2.5 times the size of a home, unless it's a farm building with 20 acres and they want to put a bigger barn than their existing farmhouse. That would make sense. This doesn't make sense.
In the interest of time,
Yeah,
what I'm wondering is whether we can agree to send a communication to the planning board asking them specifically to review the zoning ordinance relative to...
I would say we suggest to the Madam Administrator through her town planner, and then it will be brought, but expediently, this before there's a run on metal sheds and...
Bring us back a proposed amendment to the existing zoning ordinance that would prevent this type of thing from happening. Because I think that we're all clear that we wouldn't want this kind of thing in any residential neighborhood of this magnitude and type of structure, but it's not disallowed by law. We're in
Can we also put a hold for now? on anything that comes in, no?
Moratorium, no.
Just ask.
Yeah.
So so you're going to communicate to the planner about that? We don't need to do a formal motion on that. Is there anything else that anybody would like to say about this issue before we move on? Yes.
Steve Byron, 2000 Providence Pike. One thing you might want to also consider in regards to this, no matter what size of a building someone puts in an RS district or any other neighborhood, when does the use become commercial? I.e. internet business, landscaping business, and where does our regulations conform to having a business in a residential area? That's one thing that you might want to look at when you maybe change the common sense approach to this issue.
I would ask that the town administrator include that issue of conformance, commercial use versus residential use as part of that review.
That would be in the newspaper. Covered in the newspaper.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going back to the regular agenda and the